2017 was a great year for film, with the blockbuster films vastly improving over 2016, and the indie films pushing the boundaries of what film can be. With this being a top 10 best list, there will always be movies that miss out on the cut for the top 10. So here are some of my honorable mentions for the best movies of 2017. My honorable mentions include, in no particular order, Thor Ragnarok, Wonder, Star Wars The Last Jedi, Wind River, and Free Fire. So starting off the list at number 10, Wonder Woman. For me, the DC movie universe films have been 2 for 5 now. This movie and Man of Steel are the only two I actually enjoy watching. So this movie definitely breathed new life into this universe, which eventually Justice League would squash. But at the point when I saw it, it definitely felt like new energy had been brought into this universe with Wonder Woman. This film also brings a lighter tone to the universe overall, and Gal Gadot plays a great Wonder Woman. She plays the fish out of water so well as the strong female hero. Chris Pine gives a tremendous performance, acting alongside her. They both have great chemistry with each other, and that's usually the weakest part of most superhero films is the relationship part, but in this film it's definitely one of the strongest parts. The action in this film is amazing. It has great uses of slow motion in the film, when usually slow motion can be overdone, especially in a Zack Snyder film. But for me right now, the Wonder Woman sequel is really the only sequel or any DC movie I'm actually looking forward to in this universe. At number 9, Logan. This is by far the best superhero movie to come out this year. It took the Deadpool route by being... This is a great end to the Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart era X-Men stories. And besides it having mutants in it, it really doesn't feel like a superhero movie at all. It definitely feels more like a Western or a post-apocalyptic movie like a Mad Max. There's great chemistry between Wolverine and the little girl that was accompanying him. And usually, kids are not usually good in films, and it can get kind of annoying, but she worked great in this movie. Hugh Jackman keeps giving Wolverine, that he's played for 15 years almost, even more depth, even after all these movies he's been in. They almost feel inseparable to each other, and I can't imagine anybody else playing Wolverine except for Hugh Jackman. It's such an iconic role for him, and he still does a great job after all these years. Besides Deadpool, Wolverine is another movie that needs to be rated R. It uses amazing violence and action in it, as well as gore, that you couldn't have in a PG-13 movie. This really shows that not all superhero movies have to be formulaic with their story and action. Superhero movies are going to become more stale as time goes on, and this is definitely a great way to reinvigorate the superhero genre. At number 8, Baby Driver. You can check out my full review on the channel, but my thoughts on this film have changed a bit after seeing it again. To me, the best parts of this film are the heist sequences and the action, which are shot and edited beautifully. After seeing it again, the romance part of it can be kind of generic to me, and I have to be honest, it is kind of hard to watch with Kevin Spacey in it. So I'm just waiting for them to re-edit this movie so they can put Christopher Plummer in the movie. That would be great. But besides all of that, it is another great movie that is just another hit for Edgar Wright, who is just knocking out of the park with every movie he does. And at number 7, Get Out. From the directorial debut of Jordan Peele, this is a great psychological horror film with actually some surprisingly dark humor. This horror film doesn't use the generic jump scares in it as much. It uses psychological horror and tension to build up in the audience, because we know as much as the main character does, so when the twists and turns happen, we're not expecting it at all. This is very much my type of horror/thriller, where it makes you question characters' motivations and whether or not you can trust them. Much like another first-time director that will appear on this list later on, I can't wait to see what Jordan Peele does next. Because at this point, Jordan Peele, I feel, could do just about anything, and it will be great. At number 6, Dunkirk. probably the first straightforward and realistic film Christopher Nolan has done, but he still finds a way to tell a unique story by breaking up the story into 3 different sections: sea, land, and air, and telling it all at the same time. It may sound confusing and convoluted, but it really works in this film. While most war films tend to focus on one person or squad, this film focuses more on the event, because you don't really get to know any of the characters in this film. But this does, to me, add to the tension of the film, because you don't know what characters will make it out, if any will make it out of this film, which is something different that we don't see very often in war films. Hans Zimmer incorporates a great sound to his score by incorporating a ticking clock sound in the score throughout the entire film until the end, which really adds to the overall tension of the film and just the tension that the event in real life must have had. Christopher Nolan just constantly shows that he can direct really any genre: superhero, indie movie, sci-fi film, and now war film. It just adds to his amazing resume, and I don't see what he can't do, really. Halfway point now, and at number 5, Blade Runner 2049, or 2049, however you like to say it. This is the sequel to my personal favorite sci-fi movie of all time, Blade Runner. This sequel is just as good, maybe even better, but it's pretty close. But this is probably the fastest 3 hours I've ever had watching a movie. It goes by like that. It doesn't feel like 3 hours, it just feels like an hour and a half movie that you want more of. This movie adds to the overall world that Ridley Scott created in the original Blade Runner and expands on the lore and scope from the original. This movie is one of the most beautifully shot films of this year, which helps when you have one of the greatest cinematographers ever, being Roger Deakins. I don't know how he has not gotten an Oscar yet. Give this man an Oscar this year for this movie. It is breathtaking. The use of color in this film is great, especially with the use of blue and orange contrasting each other and really give it that dystopian feel to it. Denis Villeneuve shows why he is making some of the most unique and groundbreaking sci-fi movies of the past decade with this movie. I'm sure his next movie, which is Dune, will be just as good as this one. Hopefully it will make a lot more money than this one did. This movie deserved to be a much bigger hit than it actually was. People need to see this movie. And at number 4, Lady Bird. This is an emotional and realistic film that made a real personal connection with me. I have a full review on my channel, but here's some of my overall thoughts on this movie. It has some of the best performances in it of this year, by far. The 2 main lead actresses give really good, down-to-earth performances that really feel like they really were passionate about this film and showed how good the direction from Greta Gerwig was, which this was also her first directorial debut, which is astounding that somebody could have that much talent in their first film. This is definitely the movie I'm looking most at during the award season. This has so many chances to win so many different awards, including directing, screenplay, best supporting actress, and best leading actress. This movie is a need to watch movie. At number 3, and probably the best blockbuster that came out this year, War for the Planet of the Apes. This movie caps off one of the best trilogies of all time. I would put this trilogy up with Star Wars, the original trilogy, the Indiana Jones trilogy, because they never made a 4th one, the Dark Knight trilogy, and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. This is definitely... Andy Serkis continues to show why he is not only just the best motion capture actor, but a great actor with his performance as Caesar. The arc that this character has rivals most human characters, and this character was an ape. It had so much depth and emotion towards it. It is a crime that Andy Serkis isn't getting any award recognition for his performance as Caesar. Just because it's a motion capture performance doesn't make it any less than a live action one. This title can be misleading, I will say. It's not really a war or action film. It's more of a personal story about Caesar becoming the leader and savior that the apes need. It's amazing to see how much the CGI can get better even from the previous film, which looked already amazing. It's amazing how they can improve on the CGI from the previous film that already looked so realistic, and it really makes you question how a movie like the live action Beauty and the Beast can have such terrible CGI when this film, it looks like they're real. These apes feel like real characters and almost more human than the actual human characters in the film. This movie is definitely a great way to end this already perfect trilogy off. Coming up at number 2, Raw/Grave, which is a French film that I technically saw in 2016, but it wasn't fully released until 2017. This movie definitely could have made my top 2016 list, but it probably would have been at number 3. So it improved one spot if I put it on this list. But anyway, this is a horror coming-of-age movie about a girl attending a vet school who develops an addiction to human flesh. That sounds weird when I say that. Didn't realize how weird that is. She has to learn how to deal with and overcome her disease with help from other people around her. But this is very much a metaphor for her going from a kid to an adult. So it's not really truly about cannibalism, it's more of a metaphor, making it less weird. It has a haunting score that adds to the atmosphere of the bleak area that the school surrounds. And it has more gross or cringy moments rather than scary moments in it. So it's not a traditional horror film. The long, lingering shots reinforce the unsettling feeling that this film gives off. The cannibalism is shot well, very artfully done. It never goes over the top or too exaggerated. It's always grounded, and it definitely serves the purpose of the story. And yes, it's all in French. So you definitely need subtitles for this movie. But to me, subtitles should never turn somebody off on a movie. If you close yourself off from foreign films, you definitely miss a lot of great films like this one that you should be more open-minded towards. Or just learn another language. Then you'll never have to read subtitles ever again. And finally, at number 1, wasn't even really close. I knew this was probably my number 1 right when I saw this movie. It's A Ghost Story. Not only is it the best movie of the year, it is also the most underrated movie of the year. I gushed about this in my full review, and I definitely have changed my negatives about this movie. In my review, I said it's definitely not rewatchable. I was 100% wrong about that. Since I saw it the first time, I've seen it 4 more times, and every time I see it again, I get something new out of it, and that's what makes it such a great film. This movie really sticks with you after you watch it in a good way. I haven't often found a film that really makes you reflect on it like this one does. I get why people may not like this movie. They might view it as too artsy or boring. But to me, what makes great films is they make you think and really make you ask questions at a small or large scale. I cannot recommend this movie enough to people. If you are a film fan, you have to go out and see this movie. It is one of the most unique and beautiful films I've seen probably this decade. See this movie. Please. So this is my top 10 films of 2017. With every best of the year list, this is completely my opinion, and everyone's views on movies is subjective, and you're entitled to your own opinion. This is just mine and how I viewed the movies of 2017. It was just a great year for movies, and hopefully 2018 is just as good.